Hey everyone, it's Nico. I've got a fun little video here for you where I'm going to be reviewing 3 different Game Boy games. Now, all 3 of these games are Game Boy Color games, so that means you can play them on a Game Boy Color, you can play them on a Game Boy Advance, or if you have a clone console that mimics one of those systems, like a Retron 5 or something like that. And then obviously for the digital versions, you can play them on your emulator of choice. And these games can all be purchased right now, either digitally or physically through the Guardian Games website. And then additionally, there is a Kickstarter running at the time of recording this, where there's a whole bunch of different games and tiers that you can back at. So if that's more of your speed, then definitely check the pinned comment below to see your available options. And these options do include not just the original Game Boy versions, but they're also working on ports that are updated slightly for the Nintendo 64. So if you're more of a console player, that's an option. If you're more of an emulator player or you have your own flash cart, definitely check out the digitals, which is obviously the cheapest option as well. Before we get into the 3 game reviews though, I do want to emphasize, if you look at the first and the second game and you think, oh, I'm clicking off this, I'm not interested in any of these, I promise you the 3rd game for Game Boy Color is worth sticking around for. So if you see a game that just doesn't look like your speed, that's okay. I'll have the video timestamped. Just move along to the next game. But definitely stick around for the 3rd one, because I think I found one of my all-time favorite Game Boy Color games with this one. And then additionally, at the very end of the video, if you're interested in seeing what the physical editions will look like, I'll have some to show off to you guys that were sent to me by Spencer of Guardian Games Studios. So thank you to him for sending these games to me for a review. But do understand that all of the opinions in this video are my own. So with all that said, let's dive into the first review, which is for Diabetor and the Sugar Monsters. Now this is the developer's first attempt at making a game, and that's very clear. This isn't anything spectacular, but it's also not something that's awful either. I do really like the premise of it, and the premise is that the Diabetor is wreaking havoc on diabetics across the nation. So obviously every game needs a hero, so you'll play as Spencer, and he's looking to defeat the Diabetor and reverse the diabetic complications that the Diabetor is wreaking on the world by lowering your A1C. Lower that A1C, everyone. This game was developed to be educational. So for that reason, it has some elements in between the levels where you'll be asked questions. And genuinely, as somebody that's not really familiar with diabetes, these were interesting to me and taught me something. The target audience for the game was kids, and this game was actually donated to local doctor's offices to the developer. And I actually really like that about it. The game is very linear in its level design. You'll basically just move through a level. It's more of an action platformer than a run and gun, but it does kind of play like a run and gun a little bit. And at the end of each level, you'll defeat a boss, and then so on through several levels. The graphics are pretty good. The music's okay. The controls are pretty good. And overall, I did like the premise. I think this is a really good attempt for a first game, but it is also very average, so I do understand that probably most of you might not be interested in this one. So we'll keep it brief, and I'll just give it a out of 10 score. We'll say this one's like a solid 6 out of 10. Now the next game is honestly incredibly similar to Diabetor, but its premise is certainly different. And this is a game called Jab This. Now in this game, you're going to do exactly the same thing. It has a lot of reused textures, and the concept overall is exactly the same. We're going to play through a linear level, going to just shoot enemies and then fight a boss at the end and then proceed. But this one's a little bit controversial because it does touch on some topics that for some of you might, hit a nerve. But if you take this game the way the developer wants you to, and that's as a satirical game, and you understand that it's trying to be funny, it's not trying to take either side in this debate over COVID and the vaccine, then I think you'll find it humorous, and that aspect of it, I think, is more fun than Diabetor, but the gameplay is almost exactly the same. I think the key difference here is that you have limited ammunition, so you can't really go willy-nilly and shoot your syringes all over the place, because if you run out, you're basically going to have to try to get to the boss without dying. And I had this happen like on one level. It was a bit tight on how much ammo I had, and I kept dying a few times, which was a little bit frustrating. The first game didn't have a lot going on in terms of difficulty since it was aimed at kids. This one's a little bit harder, so if you're looking for more of a challenge and you enjoy humor, then Jab This is probably the better option for you. If you like the concept of a game being informational and helpful for kids with diabetes, I think Diabetor is the better option. But I do understand that this game might offend some of you, so if that's the case, just move on. It's there, it's not hurting anybody. I personally found it to be funny because, I don't know, there's just something humorous to me about taking down corrupt politicians, and also the fact that most of your enemies you fight are just gigantic, mutated Yeah, that's actually what they are. But this one, like the first game, it's okay. Nothing great, nothing terrible. Reuses a lot of the same assets, so it's kind of hard to recommend picking up both of these games. It felt like more of a one or the other type of thing here. But anyways, this was Jab This. I'd say this one might be a little bit of a step back from Diabetor, since I think the gameplay from the first game is a tiny bit better. So we'll give this one a solid 5 out of 10, just smack dab in the middle. And that leads us to our third and final game in this video, and that's for Winsley's Guardian. This is undoubtedly not just the best game in this video, but also one of my favorite Game Boy Color games that I have ever played. It has a story that has such a deep and profound meaning that I can't think of any other Game Boy game, and that's across Game Boy, Game Boy Color, or Game Boy Advance, that has touched me with its story on an emotional level. I am not a softie, so it's pretty rare that any game, even modern games, kind of makes me feel something in that way, but Winsley's Guardian did just that. And as much as I would love to really dive into the story and share its charm and what it means, not just to the developer, but also what it meant to me with all of you, genuinely, I really don't want to spoil it, because it's something worth experiencing for yourself. But what I will tell you is the overall premise of the character you're going to play, and that's Winsley. So as you play through this game, you're not just going to play through as Winsley as a little girl, you're also going to play through Winsley's life through middle school, college, you'll date, you'll have a career, you'll become a mother, a midlife crisis, and then eventually you're even going to retire. So you get to play through, in this one game, Winsley's entire life. And that has a really profound impact on the story. So that's where we're going to leave that, as to not spoil it. In terms of its gameplay, the developer describes this as a cross between Link's Awakening and Earthbound. And I would agree with that. I wouldn't say that the story has as many comedic elements as Earthbound, but it certainly has a lot of charm that did remind me of that SNES RPG. The gameplay, yeah, it's similar to Link's Awakening. It's that overhead perspective, and you often will use a melee weapon, but you also do have a ranged weapon that you gain pretty early on, and I apologize, you're probably not going to see a lot of melee combat in this video, but you do acquire different melee weapons. I just preferred the range. Personal preference. You can switch easily between your melee weapon and your ranged weapon at the click of the select button. So you have your choice there, and I really like that about it. Visually, I think the game looks really great. I enjoyed the pixel art, and then the music in this is really good for a Game Boy Color game. I was actually pretty impressed. There's a lot of different NPCs that you can engage with. They will assist you in kind of learning your objective. The game isn't open world like Link's Awakening essentially was. It's a little bit more linear, but there is some room for exploration. There's also like side activities, there's an arcade you could play some mini games in, and things like that. There's some optional quests for some NPCs and some hidden things here and there. But overall, the game is fairly linear, so you don't have to worry about feeling lost or confused on what your objective is. And I like that about it because sometimes older games that don't have a ton of text will often kind of keep you in the dark, and you'll wander around, not know where to go, what you're supposed to do. And I never really like that in any game, but that's not the case here in Winsley's Guardian. This game took me probably, I think I was around maybe like 4.5, 5 hours or so to play through. So this is a much longer game than the first two games I covered, which were only like 17, 18-minute experiences. But this is one that has so much charm behind it that this is honestly one of my top 10 Game Boy Color games of all time now. And I'm looking forward to, at some point in the future, playing through it again. And this is going to get an N64 port that is updated slightly, so maybe that'll be the point where I play it again. But you guys, this is a game you absolutely have to play for yourself. I don't often wholeheartedly recommend a game to like everyone, because I understand that when I cover games, a lot of the time they're niche or have a specific audience, and it really depends on your tastes. But this one, I feel like covers a lot of different aspects of not just its gameplay, but also with its story. If you have a heart beating in your chest, this story will make you feel something. And if it doesn't, you honestly should go see the doctor, because I don't think your heart's beating in there, because this story is quite emotional and quite profound. So you guys should absolutely play Winsley's Guardian. Again, it's available digitally, physically. There's even a demo on itch.io, so check the developer's website in the pinned comment below if you want to try the demo first and see if this is for you. Hopefully this gets ported to more platforms, because I feel like this could be one of those games that receives pretty critical acclaim, and I don't say that very often, but I'm definitely saying it here. Had I played this when the game released, you'd probably see it in my Indie Game of the Year wrap-up video at the end of whatever year it released in. But since this one has been out for a while, unfortunately won't make it there. But I love this one, you guys, genuinely. This is like a solid 8.5 to 9 out of 10 for me. This game is so much fun, and you absolutely should experience it for yourself. So here they are, you guys. Here are the physical editions for Diabetor, Jab This, and Winsley's Guardian. And as you can see, one of them is just flat. Why is it flat? Well, that's because this is actually how the games are going to be shipped to you to help prevent them being damaged in transit. And that's actually a great idea, because whenever you have cardboard boxes and they're put together, pretty likely they're going to get crushed. Now, what you'll get in the package is you're going to get the game in a hard case, a box, an insert, and a manual. Now, this is if you buy the complete in-box version of the game. I do believe there's an available option to just get the cartridge alone if you just want the cart. These manuals are really great. This one that I'm showing off here for Diabetor, the game's about diabetes, and Spencer even included recipes for those of you that are diabetic and websites for you to check out. So I thought that was a really cool addition to a manual. I miss instruction manuals so much in games, genuinely. Like, games nowadays are kind of boring. You know, usually the best thing you'll get in just a box copy of like a Switch game is like an insert. Like, the inner cover art will be, you know, reversible. That's like the best we kind of get these days. You don't ever get instruction manuals anymore. But yeah, so Jab This, Winsley's Guardian, I already put those together. And I'm going to show you how to assemble the boxes in case you're a little intimidated by that process. At first, you might be like, ooh, I don't want to ruin this. But I promise once you understand how to fold the box together and how to fold the insert together, it's really not that bad. You'll be able to do it in like a minute or two. And we're going to take a look at me doing Diabetor here. So I start out with the outer box. and it has just these 4 little flaps on the bottom. And the way you do it is pretty specific. You need to first fold this flap here down, and then you're going to take the little side tabs, and they're going to kind of tuck under that flap, and they'll hold it in place. And then once you get that in place, then you're just going to take the last flap here, and you're going to gently kind of just push it down. You want it to seat itself between the tabs, which are on the bottom, and then the flap that is above. So it's going to be kind of like in the middle of the sandwich. And once you do that, you're going to have this really nice seam. The box is going to maintain its shape, and that's it. Obviously, the top, pretty self-explanatory. You want to just bend the flap so that it'll tuck in once you have all the contents in there, and fold it down. Mine in the corner there is got a little bit of an extra fold in it. I think it got bent just a tiny bit in transit, but once it's tucked in there, no problem. Won't see it anyways. And then also my insert here has a little tab on the back that was detached. I didn't do it on camera. I put it together just fine, but then I just went ahead and just super glued it back down. Normally it's attached like the other side is to the back of the cardboard. Again, no big deal. It still maintained its shape, but I did just put a little dab of super glued it down. This is probably the most intimidating part of the whole box assembly process. So this is just how I do it. I'm not necessarily saying this is the best way, but this is a good way to do it. So you want to get the box to have its shape. So you kind of have to understand where it's supposed to bend without tearing it. So you can see the tabs on the back that are supposed to be attached. They're supposed to kind of like bend outward on the creases. And then in the front, where the cartridge goes, I usually fold these tabs out because they help push the cardboard of the back out and give it that square or rectangular shape. And then on the side, you have these flaps, and they have a little notch in them. And that notch is intended to slot into the notch, which you can see on the little tabs. Obviously, my one is currently detached, but that's it. And once you kind of slot that in on both sides, and do this part gently because you will tear it. I did tear one of mine. It did still hold its shape, but be kind of gentle with it. And when you do get that in, it should maintain its shape. And then the cartridge is intended to go in here, obviously, and then inside the box. But for this, it has to be outside of the clear case. This isn't like the later Game Boy releases that came in like a clear plastic tray and they would go in with the plastic case. No, these are the cardboard inserts from the earlier era of like Game Boy titles. And then once you have it all together, you could slide the manual in the back, slide the cart and the insert in the box. It's going to maintain its square shape, and they look great. So I hope you found this helpful, and hopefully these will look as nice on your shelf as they will on mine. I hope you enjoyed my review of these 3 games from Guardian Games Studios. Thank you again to Spencer for sending these over for me to check out. And if you thought Winsley's Guardian looked great and you're interested to see what this developer is cooking up for the future, they actually do have a couple more games in development that you can learn about on the Kickstarter page. But I will be playing through some of these, at least part of it, and previewing them in a future video in the near future. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for that. I appreciate you watching this video. It's the first time I've ever done 3 reviews all in one, but since retro games are a little bit more simplistic than some of the modern indies I cover, it made sense to do it this way. So thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. But until next time, have a good one.